Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make Lush synths like Sam Gellaitry. So I'm going to be giving away the project file and samples from this video in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because they'll be available for you without a download gate. And yeah, let's get started. So, the first sound we have here are these chords, which sound like this. So basically, I'll show you the notes first. These are playing actually pretty simple chords. These are all major and minor seventh chords. And basically what I've done here is I've taken, so these would be like the basic major / minor seventh chords. Those are those. And then what I've done is I've taken them and I've added some voices underneath those to just give it a bigger sound. So the first voice I took was the fifth. So for example, like here would be the fifth in this first chord. I just took that and put it down an octave on every chord, doubled it up, and then I took the root note and I put that 2 octaves down. So basically what you're getting is just a wider spread across the keyboard. And you can hear it sounds a lot bigger. If I turn those off, the chords are kind of small sounding, but yeah, adding those lower notes just kind of gives them like a broader thing. And then I'll also talk about like the major and minor seventh chords as well, because I think those are pretty important for the style. Definitely to get that like selection style feel. You want to use like some more interesting chords than just like basic major and minor triad. So that's what I've got here. Like I said, these are just all major and minor seventh. You could also make them ninth chords, like if I add this voice on top of there, for example, and then like that. That would also work. Just something other than just like the root note, the third, and then the fifth, which is what a basic triad would be. And then as far as the pattern goes, like it's kind of like rhythmic, kind of like a trappy rhythm, I guess. And yeah. So then for the synth sound on this one, I made it with analog. What we've got here is I've got 2 saw waves. You can see they both have pitch envelopes on them going up. That's what's giving them that kind of like and pitch there at the start of the sound. If I turn those off, you can hear it's subtle. But yeah, when I turn those off, it's not quite as cool sounding. Also, quick correction. The second waveform here is actually a square wave. So I've got a saw wave and a square wave. I've also got a little bit of white noise here, you can see. And then those are going into this low pass. And then the low pass has this kind of envelope on it, so it's got a little bit of attack there. I thought that went kind of nicely with the pitch envelope on the oscillators. And you can hear this isn't really doing a whole lot. It's just kind of like at the end and the start of the sound, like opening and closing, and you hear that filter sweep. But then for most of the sound, it's just completely open, and you just get the saw wave and the square wave and the noise kind of coming through. So then after that, I've got the amp envelope set like this, and then I've got a bit of vibrato. So I use the vibrato here just to give it a bit of like a warbly pitch kind of sound, like a more analog synth style thing. You can see it's pretty slow, and then I have the rate at 55%, or the amount at 55%. Here's without it, and then with it. So you can hear it just makes this synth a little bit more interesting. Another thing I will also talk about that I don't usually talk about is you can see I changed the voices here to 32. So what this does is it just sets how many notes can be played at once, basically, in your synth. And so if you set it to 32, it just allows all of these to come through, because I think by default it's on like 8 or something, and I noticed if we set it to 4, you can see. Yeah, like you can't hear all the notes coming through. So I always just set it to 32, the maximum amount, and that allows all those notes to come through. So then after that, I've got this phaser here, and what I'm using the phaser for is more like texture than anything. Like you can hear when I turn it off and on, it's really just adding that very subtle kind of like metallic thing to the sound. So I like using phasers for stuff like this. I mean, if you use a phaser with like a lot of LFO on it that's kind of like moving it, it kind of defeats the purpose. But when you just keep it in place like this and use it more like the way you would use like a filter or something like that, you can get some interesting stuff. So that's just kind of the key here. I've got that set there. I've got the dry wet down. And yeah, just adding a bit of texture. Then after that, I've got this chorus, which is set like this. So we've got the amount pretty high and the rate's pretty slow. Kind of my standard settings there if you watch a lot of my videos. You know that's how I usually use this. But yeah, it's just adding a bit more space to the sound. you can hear it really helps to kind of give it that like washed out, like just analog chorusy kind of sound. So then after that, the last thing I have on here is this reverb, which is set like this. So I've got the size and the decay time down, and I'm just using this to give it sort of like a very tight like ambience, if that makes any sense. Like if I turn this off, and then back on, you can hear it's really like, it's not like a super pronounced reverb, but it's adding, like I said, like that little bit of space to the sound. It's kind of just doubling up on what the chorus is doing, where it's giving it that tight kind of like dimension, as opposed to like super long reverb or super long delay or anything like that. So that's it for the chords. The next thing we have here is the 808, which sounds like this. So this is pretty straightforward. It's actually just an 808 sample. I wanted to make this though because I wanted to show you guys how to do those big kind of stereo 808s that you hear in a lot of Sam's tracks, and not just how to do them, but how to do them the right way, because I think there are a few mistakes that are pretty commonly made with them. So for the notes on this, it's just playing the chords, or the root notes for the chords, and as you can see, it's actually playing the same rhythm as the chords as well, which is kind of cool. You know, it makes the whole thing feel a lot more like together and tighter. But yeah, so the way I did this was, like I said, it's just an 808 sample. It's this 808 sample. And I just put it in a simpler here. And then after that, I put it through a bit of saturation to give it a bit more grit and make it a bit more powerful. And yeah, then after that, I've got the Haas effect. And so the Haas effect is what's giving it the big stereo image. So if you don't know what the Haas effect is, it's basically this very old school kind of, or not so old school, but kind of like an old school stereo trick where basically you take a signal and you split it into the left and the right or into the left and the right ears basically. And what you do is you take one of those and move them ever so slightly forward, and so that it's happening a few milliseconds, usually between 10 and like 30 to 50 milliseconds after the left ear or the right. It could be either. Just one of those you take and you delay it a little bit, and then what happens is, because you're hearing the same thing in the left and right ear, but one of them is slightly after the other one, that's how you get that big stereo effect. So the way I did this here was using this audio effect rack. Basically, we've got two chains. We've got a right chain, which is completely dry, and a left chain, which has got this simple delay on it. You can see I've got them both panned completely to the right and left. And then on the delay chain, aka the left ear, I've got the simple delay, like I said. And the simple delay is on 10 milliseconds, just like I said. I've got the dry wet all the way up. We've got it linked, so it's a mono delay, because you just have it on one ear. You don't want to have a left and right signal on this one. And then we got the feedback all the way down. So all this is doing is literally just delaying the contents of this chain forward slightly. And there we go. That's how you get the Haas effect. So here's without it. It's just kind of like a boring 808, but with it, there we go. We get the big stereo effect. And then after that, I have this utility. And what I'm using the utility for here is actually for the bass mono thing. So you can see we've got, the bass set to mono here. I've got that turned on. And then I've got that at about like 119 hertz. Around there is good. Usually I would just keep it, around like between 100 and 200 for this. And what this allows you to do is you get a lot of that nice stereo high end from the 808 and mid-range, really mostly like mid-range and low mids. But then the really low end that you want to be mono is going to be mono this way. So this is kind of like going back to what I was saying about like doing it the right way. It's just like not letting it get too out of hand. Like using stuff like this that keeps it under control, so we still get a nice stereo 808 that you hear. But then in the really low end with this, you get that nice deep mono low end. So then the last thing that I want to talk about with this 808 is tuning. So if you look in here in these controls, you can see I have this at +4, but then I also have the detune at -15 cents. So something with a lot of 808s, as you know, is when you get them straight out of a sample pack, like if I just drag this one back in with none of that stuff and play it through this tuner, you can see I'm playing C right now, but you can see it's not playing C. So usually what you have to do, what that means is you got to turn it up, in this case, +4 on the pitch, and there we go. But something you'll notice there is that this is still not perfectly in tune. You can see it's about 15 cents out of tune. And if we play this with the whole track, you can kind of hear that. Like, it sounds kind of just wonky in there. So what you got to do to fix that is you have to go into this detune. And just kind of like pitch it a little bit. Like, there we go. Now it's perfectly in tune. And if we listen to it with the track, The tuner now is being kind of weird. But you can hear it's a lot more in tune. So that is definitely a very, very important tip for your 808s there. So the next sound we have here is this arp, which sounds like this. So what I've got here for the notes on this arp is it's basically just following the chord progression, and yeah, that's really it. I'm just taking the notes of the arpeggio or of the chord progression and kind of like playing them in this sort of 8th note rhythm. You can see some of these I've kind of moved to different places. Like for example, this note is actually that B, which would be the 3rd of that first chord, but I've taken and put it up an octave, and then I've got the 5th there as a 2nd note. So just little stuff like that. So it's not just like exactly the chord progression. Like, you want to make it a little bit more interesting, but still following the sort of foundation you've set for yourself in the track. So then for the sound on this one, I made it with operator. And what we've got going on here is I've got 3 sine waves doing some FM. You can see if I show you the envelopes, you can see, yeah, it's doing like this sort of like pluck with a little bit of attack type of thing. And then I've got those going into a low pass filter. And then the low pass filter has an envelope on it as well. That's what it sounds like without it. And then with it, so it's just kind of like with the chords where it's like tightening the sound up a little bit. Then after that, I've got a little bit of this LFO on here. You can see I've got a very small amount, but the rate is very high. And this is on the pitch. So what I'm doing here is I just have it on the pitch a little bit, but it's what's giving it that like almost like vocally character. If I turn this off, you can hear it's a lot more straightforward. But then when we add that, that's what gives it that cool kind of pitch fluctuation. So pretty simple there. Just kind of like the fast time and the slow amount is really the key with that one. Then after that, I've got the saturator, which is set like this. We've got a bit of drive, and I've turned up the bass frequency on the analog clip. And this is what's making it like a lot more percussive. If I turn this off, you can hear it's kind of flat and just a little bit dull sounding. When we add this, it really brings it out by adding a lot of harmonics on top of the sound, as well as it kind of brings out that like clickiness and makes it punch through a little bit more that way. So then the next thing I've got on here is this echo, which is set like this. I've got it on the time mode, meaning it's not synced to the BPM. We're just using milliseconds here. But what I've done is I'm using it at a very fast speed with a very small, with a very small dry wet. I'm just adding that little bit of like echo that you hear in there. So yeah, pretty simple there. Just kind of adds that nice like organic analog sort of echo character to the sound. Then after that, I've just got a bit of reverb, and that's really it for this art. It's a pretty simple sound, but definitely kind of an interesting one, I feel like. So the last thing we have here is this little high string sample, which sounds like this. So this is a pretty standard sort of like high string sample that you hear in a lot of tracks on Selection, not just Sam G's, but he does use this a lot as well. And I've done it in a bit of an interesting way here. So what we've got going on is, like I said, it's just a really simple like high string sample. Like something like that you would hear in like a lot of house music, or like I said, a lot of other people on Selection use these as well. But what I've done with it is I put it into a granular synth. And if you don't know what a granular synth is, I'm using this Granulator 2 here. It's a free one for Ableton. If you get the project file and samples, you will get it for free in the description. Check that out. But yeah, basically I put it in here, and what a granular synth does is it plays back audio just like how a sampler would, but the difference is a sampler just plays the sound from start to finish. What the granular synth does, or the granulator in this case, is it's playing all over the sample. So if you look at this here, you can see that little yellow line that's jumping around. That's playing just all different parts from the sample as opposed to just going from start to finish. And what this allows you to do is basically just make a seamless loop of any sound, because like when you have something like this where it's just long and you just jump around the sample like that and play a long note, you can just hold that out as long as you want, and it will just keep constantly playing new parts of the sample. And thus, yeah, like I said, you can kind of get like an endless thing this way. So again, it's just like a little bit of a more interesting way to do it than just like putting it in a sampler or using one from some sample pack or something like that. When you put it into this granular synth, you can kind of get a little bit more customizable with it by having a seamless thing. Anyway, after that, I've got this echo. And what this echo is doing is, as you can imagine, you're not really hearing it much because an echo is like a rhythmic effect, and this isn't very rhythmic. It's kind of just a long drone. But what it is doing is adding some stereo width to the sound, as well as kind of helping to like fit it into the track a little bit more. So what I'm doing here is, you can see I've got the linking of the 2 ears turned off here. And then we just got the left ear and the right ear. And what I'm doing with those, by having them at 2 separate times, is it's creating this wider stereo image. So here's with it, and then without it. You can hear it's a little bit louder without it actually, but it's a lot more like flat sounding. When we have this on there, it feels a lot wider and a lot bigger. And then also that little bit of quietness that it's adding, like how it's kind of turning the sound down, that's fine. That's what I was saying. Like it helps to just kind of fit it into the track a little bit more, because all of these have like some kind of, you know, echo or reverb or some kind of like timing effect like that. The Haas effect on the 808, for example. So by having something on this, it kind of just fits it into the stereo field of what's already going on, or the stereo field that's already in your track, as opposed to just trying to like put it on top of all that. Like, you kind of get what I'm saying? Is like, if you had all this is your stuff, you could either add something into this, or you could just put something on top of it that's just kind of there. I'd rather put something like into the mix, if that makes any sense. So that's really the goal there with that like stereo thing, and it kind of gives it that cool like analog echo texture. So pretty much it for this one. Just want to show you guys some techniques. I got a bunch of requests for this one. So yeah, so that's going to be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Once again, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description for free. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because at any tier you'll be able to download it without having to go through a download gate. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.